Welcome to another episode of the Raidercast, your podcast for everything silver and black. I am your host, JT, and today I'm going to be going over my picks at each position group for players to watch. Now, what this means is it's not necessarily players that are well established or expected to get starting roles, but players that could either be or are on the fringe of getting a roster spot or even a practice squad spot, or could actually get the starting role. So I'm not going to be looking at let's see what Derek Carr does and with Devontae Adams and stuff like that. I'm looking at the players that are fringe, that are less known, usually younger players, and I want to see, and I'm going to look at and explain why I think these players are going to be on the roster come September 11th. Or the start of the NFL season. So let's get into it with my first player that I think we must watch in camp, and that is Lester Cotton, who is an offensive lineman. So he is actually from Alabama, started 28 games. He was drafted in 2019, my fault. He has been on the practice squad the whole time. He's played 5 snaps total for us. He received a good pass block grade from PFF, which I'm not going to talk about because it's five snaps. That's not a lot. That's not enough. But he helped get that Alabama line to only have 1 sack a game. Number 8 in the nation. He started 13 games in his junior year. Started 28 games at Alabama in 4 years. 10 at left guard, 18 at right guard. He looks like he could be, from what people are reporting, beat writers and stuff like that, he could be that starting right guard role, fighting with Denzel Good for that role. Could he take it from Denzel Good? Maybe, maybe not. But with that positive rap coming from these beat writers, I think it's a possibility that he could end up being the starter if Denzel Good goes down, or if Denzel Good doesn't play out, he could end up being the starter. We don't know, obviously, but it's looking like he could have a very good camp, and he's been developing very well. And let's see if he can actually get the start by midseason. So my next player that I'm looking at, who could be a third string or could be a solid player, is Jasper. So another player that I think could be another player I think that could end up being on the 53 roster is Jasper Horsted. Jasper Horsted, I didn't even really know until I was looking at the roster, and I was like, I'm trying to find a tight ends. Let's take a look at all these players, see what they've done. And last year he did not get that many receptions. I think he only had 2 receptions, but they each were for a touchdown, which is absolutely crazy. He looked really good in the preseason. He had a 3 touchdown game versus the Titans. Just looking at him, he was a tight end coming from a wide receiver, so he had a lot of great stats in college. So he's a big guy. He's 6'3", 237 pounds. He's a pretty big guy, and we all know that wide receivers converting to tight ends, i.e. Darren Waller, can really work out. Not sure why he didn't get a lot of snaps. I've looked at articles from Chicago Bears, NBC, whatever, and they were like, he's playing better than Jimmy Graham. We're not sure why he's not starting, but he had 2 touchdowns and 2 receptions, which is pretty insane. He didn't have a lot of snaps though, so he didn't get a lot of yards, but in his 2019 campaign, I believe he took 2020 off. He was a 2019 draftee. He had 10 receptions. He had 1 touchdown. And honestly, in his his final touchdown amount was 28 on 196% receptions at Princeton, which is insane. So he's definitely a touchdown machine. I think he could be really good in the end zone and take that tight end 3 spot, if I'm being honest, because we know Moreau is more than likely gonna get the tight end 2 spot, and we know Darren Waller is tight end 1 no matter what. So looking at the tight end 3, I was trying to see if there was any players that stood out to me, and honestly, looking at him, I think he could very much be surprised, especially coming into the tight end 3 role. He could get very good red zone looks. He's a big guy, so he can make those contested catches. He made those pretty insane catches in the preseason game versus the Titans. So I think he could be kind of a shocking 53-man roster, he makes it, I think that could be pretty shocking for a lot of people. The next player that I think we should all keep an eye on in camp is Mack Hollins, wide receiver. I think he could be the surprise wide receiver 4. I think wide receiver 3 is locked up for Keelan Cole. I think Keelan Cole is probably the best wide receiver 3 that we have on the roster. However, that wide receiver 4 role is kind of between Demarcus Robinson and Mack Hollins and Tyron Johnson. However, I think Mack Hollins is going to take it. He's not he should be well known by Raiders fans because he had that catch in 2020 in that Miami game at the end of the game that set up the field goal for us to lose. So he has some pretty big play potential. He had 4 touchdowns last season, so another red zone threat, which is what you want to see in your wide receiver 4. Is you don't necessarily need a lot of yardage because you're not going to get it as a wide receiver 4. You're the 4th option, even in 5th or 6th, even behind the tight ends. But you need those touchdowns, and he had 4 touchdowns on 223 yards on 14 receptions, and so that's a lot of yardage on 14 receptions, and that's a lot of touchdowns for that little yardage. So he's definitely a red zone threat. He's kind of speedy. He's a little speed to him. She's shifty. He can make those contested catches just like I was talking about with Horster. He's 6'4", 221. He's a giant. He's a big dude. I think he can do really well. I mean, his best season was probably either his rookie year with the Eagles and 226 yards, 1 touchdown, but his last season with the 4 touchdowns on 223 receptions was easily his best season, and I think he could definitely replicate that in the McDaniels offense and just get those quick red zone catches, and be another like slot receiver with Renfro because he can be the kind of that shifty guy. Now, when it comes to the next player, I've talked about him a lot. He's definitely one of my favorite players that we drafted in this draft, and that is Zamir White, otherwise known as Zeus. I think he's going to have a great role as that running back 4 and could be that running back even 2, honestly. He could jump Brandon Bolden and Kenyon Drake, in all honesty. He is Josh Jacobs, but with more speed. He has the same kind of power. He has the same kind of run potentials that Josh Jacobs has. He can break those tackles. He can keep his balance super well. He didn't have a lot of great stats in Georgia just because he was injured. He had 2 ACL tears, 1 in high school, 1 in college, which is kind of a worry, but I don't think it's going to be a thing that's going to follow him, although that is a concern, his injury, which is why I think he fell to the 4th round, because in all honesty, he's a 2nd round, 3rd round, he's probably a 2nd round talent. However, he's drafted in the 4th or 5th by us, and I think he can do really well. He was also behind James Cook, who's also a really good back. So I think that learning the offense behind Josh Jacobs, behind Kenyon Drake, behind Brandon Bolden, who knows this offense, is really going to help him develop. And honestly, by the end of the season, I believe he's going to have that running back 2 position away from Kenyon Drake. He has a lot of potential. He has a lot of drive. Coaches talked about him in college, in high school, just doing all this extra work. As a freshman in high school, in 9th grade, he was there all summer, which is not a lot of freshmen high schoolers do. Even in college, he was just doing his own workouts at his own time, all the time, trying to get better, trying to push himself. And I think that's such a quality that we need, and that's why we drafted him, because that's his quality that McDaniels and Ziegler loves from a player, is that they have that drive to be better at all times. So I think Zamir White will definitely have a big role on our team and have that 53-man roster spot, and honestly, by the end of the season, should have a much bigger role in the offense. So on the defensive side of the ball now, I've done the offense. I have my own line, tight end, wide receiver, and running back done. I'm not going to go over quarterbacks because it's Derek Carr, Jarrett Stidham, Nick Mullins. I don't really feel like we should be looking at quarterbacks too much because it's not super important. Jarrett Stidham or Nick Mullins is going to be just a fine backup quarterback. I think it's going to be Jarrett Stidham. So I guess if you can say we should watch the QB battle between Nick Mullins and Jarrett Stidham, but in all honesty, it's not something I'm going to be looking for when it comes to, because backup quarterback for me is, can they do okay in the offense, and that's all that matters. Can they come in for like hopefully only a game or half a game and play to a good enough level to help us win, which I'm sure both of them can do, so I'm not even going to bother looking at them. So that's why I'm not counting quarterbacks. However, looking at the defense, there's a lot of players that have a lot of potential. There's a lot of undrafted free agents that we got on the defensive side of the ball, and a lot of players we drafted in the draft in the past, this draft and the draft before, that we have a lot of defensive players, a lot of young players. They're going to try and push themselves to prove themselves to be on that 53. And one of the players that I'm really excited for is Matthew Butler. I was tempted to put Neil Farrell Jr., who's the other draft defensive tackle. However, I think Matthew Butler will have a much better like visual, like in the box score. He was a beast for the Volunteers in Tennessee. He had in his senior year, he had 47 tackles, 8.5 for a loss, and 5 sacks in 13 contests. So as a defensive tackle, getting 5 sacks, that's pretty good. He was named second team academic All-American. I think he's going to be a beast in the pass rush. Neil Farrell is more of the running game. He's a big run stopper. I think Matthew Butler, though, will have that impact. And especially with all these defensive tackles in the PUP list are like not performing super well. Our defensive tackle room is not very good this year, which is why I think Matthew Butler could prove himself to be a starter along with Neil Farrell. I think Neil Farrell will be more in those run stopping downs or those run downs. However, I think Matthew Butler might be in like a pretty consistent starter on the line on all downs. He could, especially with Jonathan Hankins getting old, if we don't sign Sue, all these players in the PUP list that are the older veterans that you might see more often on the field, I think Matthew Butler will take those spots and have a big impact on the D-line. Looking at him, I'm really excited for him, and I hope he works out because, you know, I really want to see him succeed. And plus, like I posted on my Twitter, @Condor Season, shameless plug, he looks massive. He looks so strong. He's 6'4", 295, 23 years old. I think he could have a big impact on the D-line, and I really hope he does because that will help the team win. Talked about one So I talked about one Butler already, Matthew Butler. And I'm going to talk about another Butler we have on the team, and that is Darius Butler, the linebacker out of ASU. I think that he will be an exceptional linebacker for and a young, developing linebacker for the team. He looks like he looked insane at ASU. He was very much overlooked coming out of high school because of his size. I believe he's 5'10", same height as me, so I'm the same height as this guy, but he is a beast on the field. He had all Pac-12 recognition in 2021. He had 68 tackles, 8.5 for loss, 2 sacks, and a team high as a linebacker, 3 interceptions and 3 pass breakups. He's awesome in the pass game, which is what you kind of need in your linebackers nowadays. So I think him learning under Jayon Brown, who is, in my opinion, the best pass coverage linebacker we have on the team right now, I think that he could really develop really well into a solid linebacker that we could actually see a lot of snaps this season, especially if there's any injuries in the linebacker core. I think he could step up and be a major steal for us from the undrafted free agent class. I'm very excited for him. I think he's going to be a rising, not necessarily a star, but a rising player that will have some big moments in this upcoming season. But if you know me, I follow and love the USFL. And part of the USFL is developing players and bringing players back into the league, either on practice squad or even getting them started on rosters. And one of the players that we signed recently is from the USFL, and it's cornerback Ike Brown. Ike Brown had a really good season for the New Orleans Breakers this past season. He had 16 tackles, 8 solo, 2 interceptions for 98 yards, 1 pick six, which was almost the entirety of the 98 yards. He originally was on the Buffalo Bills and was placed on the reserve/retired list, which basically meant he didn't do anything the whole season. He kind of just sat on the roster and just kind of waited to be used. And if you look at his Twitter, you will find that he actually trained and was at the Raiders looking to get a roster spot this last offseason in 2021. So he's played with us or tried to get with us before. Obviously didn't work out. However, I think that he could make a roster spot. He had allowed 0 touchdowns, only 1 pass completed the entire season, and I think 11 games played because he played in the playoffs. So that is insane. Even though it's against other practice squad players, allowing 0 touchdowns even at that level is still incredibly impressive. I think he's really good man, which Graham likes to play man coverage. So I think he could definitely be a relief, kind of cornerback, and won't be a liability, which is really important when you're a backup corner, is that you're not a liability. You do not want to be a liability as a backup because you won't see the field. even in relief. Like, you don't want to give up those big plays, and he didn't give up any big plays last year. He made big plays, so I think he's going to be a surprise 53-man roster spot. I don't think he's going to be practice squad. I think he's going to make the 53 and be a backup, you know, dressed for the game day type of guy. The last player I'm going to be talking about is safety Tyree Gillespie. Tyree Gillespie was signed to the Raiders. He was a 4th-round pick on the 2021 draft, but he didn't get any sort of play time too much. He had recorded only 1 tackle in the entirety of the season, so he didn't do really much of anything. He kind of just sat as a relief backup player. But with the safety spot kind of like, especially behind Daron Harmon, and I think Daron Harmon's going to be the starter, or one of the starters, Trayvon Moehrig and Jonathan Abram, there's kind of an open-endedness to where the safety position is going to go, even in the practice squad, on the starting roster. I think Tyree Gillespie will have a good camp. I think he has the potential to be a good player for us. Just looking at his college stats, he had 146 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, 2 sacks, 12 pass defended, and 1 forced fumble. Although he didn't have any interceptions, he could be a really good strong safety, which, based on his stats, that look like what he will be. He has, I mean, the 2 sacks and the, you know, a lot of tackles is usually a strong safety type of player. So I think he could be that rising box safety, strong safety player. Can learn underneath Daron Harmon, who has played strong safety before, and really take his game to the next level. So that's my list for all the players that are must watches to see in training camp, to see how they do. Let me know down in the comments below if you disagree or even agree with me. Leave players that you think that you want to watch or that I should watch going to training camp. Also, like, subscribe, share this video, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Condor Season. Twitter, I post a lot. Instagram, I post less, but it's mostly edits that I post. And Twitter, I post everything that comes to my mind, especially about football and the Raiders. And peace out, Raider Nation. Have a good day.